Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Yager, head of WebInnovationX Global Think Tank and the W3C New York Metro chapter. Welcome to EdTech X Innovation Week. Today is Wednesday, October 6, 2021. And we are having Symposium X, which is basically a gathering of the industry leaders in talking about how we are building the next generation of emerging technologies and standards for business innovation. I invited 3 industry leaders to share their innovation strategy, starting with Lee Rubenstein, and Lee is from edX, VP of Business Development, and Paul Belfanti, VP Product Content Systems from Macmillan Learning, and George Kirscher, CIO of Daisy Consortium. So let me explain the format, how we're going to do this 1.5 session. It's a very exciting session, as you can see in front of you. We have truly leaders in what it takes to build education technologies and what are the keys to the future as we look towards 2022 and beyond. Let me talk about how we're going to spend the 1.5 hours. First, each speaker will be presenting their thoughts about innovation strategy, and about 15 minutes, and the audience can you can click on the Q&A in the attendee hub to ask any questions that you may have. And after that, at about 12 noon Eastern time, we will be coming back together. All the featured speakers will be coming back together, and we will be having some panel discussion. So stay tuned, stay tight at your seats, and let us stay through the 1.5 hour, and it's going to be very exciting. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn to Lee. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Hang on 1 second, and here we go. Thank you, Rachel. I assume you can see my screen and the audience can as well.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Terrific. Terrific. Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be with everybody today here. I am a VP of Business Development at edX, and make sure I try to figure out how we can make the slides move. And there we go. It's very important for everyone to understand that at edX, we started with a goal of making access to the world's top courses from the world's best universities available to anyone on the planet that wanted to take them. And we did this back in 2012. We started with 1 course from MIT by edX's founder, Anant Agarwal. And at that time, we figured if we could get 5,000 people to sign online for one of these brand new MOOC courses, massive open online courses, it would be successful enough for us to invest behind and continue to do more as a nonprofit. And interestingly enough, after the first 48 hours or so, we had 125,000 people register for the course and about 175,000 register over 2 weeks before the course started. So we knew we were on to something. This was a brand new way for us to think about reaching the masses with access to education that they would not normally have an opportunity to get. And so we quickly expanded our vision. And the vision was to create a world where everybody interested in learning would have an opportunity to come online and go do that. They could learn for free, or they could learn and get a certificate from the university or institution that they were interested in getting it from on edX. And ultimately, while we started with MIT and Harvard, we soon had over 160 different partners creating courses on edX. And what was very interesting is that we started off with a mandate to only use universities. But over a couple of years, we expanded the idea to include courses that would come from people that were like-minded, institutions that were corporations and NGOs. Maybe it was the World Bank or the IMF, or in this case, IBM. And one of the very first to join was the World Wide Web Consortium. And the W3C was an amazing innovator at that time in helping us create courses that they ran on the edX platform for literally hundreds of thousands of learners that wanted to take them, because those learners were interested in, how do I get the skills I need to be relevant in the job market or in the job I have today? And it opened our eyes, because some of us have had a 40-year experience developing online learning or learning through or training for corporations that were delivered across many different mediums, some of them more successful than others, all of them expensive, time-consuming, and hard to distribute. And here we were in a whole new world order to do that. And so I tell you this by means of background as we begin to have a conversation today about what we've learned over that time and what has the impact of COVID been, and how much has the industry changed, how much has the mindset of employers changed, and learners and employees and those that aspire to create better lives for themselves have changed, and the access points that they're using in order to get there. And what does that mean in terms of the technology? So in order to understand the situation, I think it helps to tell you a little bit about edX for a second in terms of the numbers and what the data is. Right now, edX has over 30 million registered learners on the platform. They're taking over 110 million courses. Actually, since we last put this slide together, it's 140 million course enrollments. There are about 3,600 courses. There are 160 some partners. And out of those people that have come and take courses and just looked and browsed for free, or have decided that they wanted to register for a nominal fee for the certificate, we've issued 2.1 million certificates to date for courses completed. If you could imagine what would happen in a university classroom, it would literally take you centuries to reach that many people as an individual contributor. So we've got top institutions, and the learners have decided that they wanted to get more than single courses. Their feedback was very immediate, and they said, I'm looking to build a skill or competency. Why? We didn't care at that point. But what we did know is that the learners wanted to go beyond a single course. It was more than curiosity. They wanted to use technology in order to develop a competency. So we structured the courses into series or sequences that one could take in order to build a competency. The very first one was called a MicroMasters. The MicroMasters came from MIT. It was their idea. Supply chain is something they were very famous for. Everybody was looking to hire people with supply chain experience. People wanted to migrate up the food chain from, I'm just an administrator, to I would like to be in supply chain, it pays better. There's openings at my company. And so they created something called a MicroMasters. A MicroMasters was 50% of the master's degree at MIT, but no application fee. Just come and take it. If you take the MicroMasters, it was a series of 4 courses, and you pass it, you would get something that was a certificate that was backed by credit. What did that mean? It meant that if you applied to MIT, they would give you 50% off the time and the cost of getting a supply chain master's degree on campus. And so it was a flag, and one of the first flags, I think, to the corporate environment, that if MIT stood behind this and thought it was worth 50% of a master's degree, I can be pretty confident that the people that are taking these courses are going to have the skills that they would need to be successful there. That makes them an elite class. First of all, they showed they had the grit and rigor to find something like edX, to find this type of learning, to be persistent and to complete it and to pass it, because it's an MIT hard master's degree. A sea change started to happen at that point. And one of the sea changes was employers began to think about the traditional ways they would typically interview and hire for positions, and begin to assume that maybe there were alternatives coming to the forefront that would change the way they looked at hiring and promotion forever. But it's a slow journey. The next series was, what do you do if there's a series of courses and they're not from schools that don't have master's degrees? Those were called professional certificate programs. IBM, Linux, World Wide Web Consortium, others have all put together professional certificate programs. And then finally, micro-bachelors, which is our newest, which is, I would like to create courses that one could get for credit with no application fees at a low cost, that would issue a transcript immediately from the edX universities who were making courses for adults that had no college or some college, no degree, that needed the skills to get entry-level or middle-skilled jobs in the most high-demand areas today. So you could be a barista But if you wanted to get into cloud computing or IT services or data science, you could take these series of 3 and 4 courses in order to move forwards and do that. So, sorry, went wrong way. Pretty cool. Now, things were progressing. And I think everything that we were doing every day was building towards what could potentially be a really different way for people to imagine their careers and education. We also thought about the idea of a 4-year university. And we're talking about technology now. So with an audience that is now entering college that was born with a mobile device in their hand, the idea of a 4-year university is really a 250-year-old construct. It doesn't necessarily match the world we live in today. Think of all the people that could get the education they need without having to leave home or to go to campus or to pay that tremendous cost. And there's lots of reasons for them to not do that. They could now participate in this great new economy as we entered the 21st century. So what happened with COVID? Kind of interesting, a super double whammy. The first thing was all of the schools had to go to remote. So did the workplace. And they had very little in terms of tools that they could use in order to continue education or to continue training. And they found edX. So in 1 month, in April of 2020, we had 5 million new registrations on the platform. That was more registrations in 1 month than we did in an entire year. So the audience found us, and we have very little money to advertise. So it's not about the advertising, it's about the technology. And then when they came and had the experience, they found that they were in a multi-dimensional adaptive learning world where they would have an interleaf learning sequence that included video, but it would also include readings. It included discussion forums, 40 different assessment types, not your granddad's old-timey online education. There were open response assessments and labs and tools and coding sandboxes. Really fascinating how many people, especially when we started looking how many were unemployed, were coming and looking for a new normal for themselves. So we saw an uptick in learners that way. It was time to begin to survey the learners and have a discussion with them about why they were doing what they were doing. It's very interesting when you have a platform and you're capturing every keystroke and you're analyzing it, to spend some time thinking about why people are doing what they're doing versus exactly what they're doing, then trying to interpret that yourselves. So we surveyed literally millions of learners in order to figure out what was going on. And this is what we saw initially from that. And I wanted to share it with you because I think it's understanding the marketplace itself that drives the ability to create technical change that's going to serve an audience that's already there. Too many times we invest in tools and research and solutions that don't necessarily match with what your audience is looking for in the first place. So who took what and why? 25% of the people were taking it because they wanted to upskill in their current job. Why did they want to do that? Well, we've all heard a lot of the conversation about how many jobs are going to be eliminated due to AI and robotics over the next 5 to 6 years. And I think that there was some interest in inoculating themselves against being swept away in jobs that were going to no longer be required in modern work. But there was another side to it too. And that was that if I don't maintain my relevancy with the speed of technological change and the information that's available, then somebody's going to leapfrog over me and they're going to get those skills. And they're going to not have to go to a university to do it. They'll be able to get them online. And then they're going to be able to apply them to this job. And I won't be relevant anymore. And so for those of us that thought school started and ended with our 4-year degree, because that's the way it was for decades and decades, especially for my generation, then I think all of us have started to realize we need to become lifelong learners in order to maintain our relevancy. But where can we go to get that? So the MOOC platforms and the online learning, not just from edX, but from many different providers, are a solution to that. Some of them just had more time, okay, and then 16% of them were replacing schools. So that was interesting, but as we dug deeper into this over the last 12 months, one of the things we found from them was that we had a massive number of employees coming to the platform, and 50% of them were indicating they needed new skills. And they were remote, and there was no one to tell them what to do, where to go, what they should take. And I think that we've uncovered a great hole in our employment and management system and our HR systems of not necessarily knowing where the skills gaps were and being able to point our employees at the skills gaps in saying, here's the solutions that you could undertake on your own in order to fill that gap. And then you would be really super important to our organization. 70% of the CEOs were telling us they were concerned about the availability of key skills at all. This ended up being part of a conversation about why we should think about reinventing higher education. In other words, you're paying a lot of money to take a 4-year education and carrying a lot of debt and coming to my company, but you don't have the skills you need to frankly be very relevant or hit the ground running. And so you're not worth the money that we would need to pay you in order to help you sublimate the debt that you took on in order to get that degree. So that's kind of a big deal. Certainly it's a big deal in the student population, and a very big deal for those that decided college wasn't for them, but now that they've been in the workforce for a couple of years, for whatever life circumstances were, have decided that I wish I had made other choices, but there's no possible way I can leave my house, my home, my family, and my current job to go live on campus somewhere with a bunch of rising freshmen. Okay. Interestingly, 77% of employees were willing to retrain, but one of the things that became clear to us and that they indicated was that if an employer was going to offer the opportunity and subsidize the cost of that retraining, then it was going to act as an anchor to keep them in the jobs they were in or at the company they were in. And there was a notoriety that had developed around especially millennials staying about 2.5 years at a job before they wanted to move on and find something more challenging. We were unlocking what one of the challenges was, and we were doing it kind of during COVID by finding out how fast and how quickly they were migrating to take these courses. And at that point, 70% of the students that are on edX that we saw either had a college degree or a postgrad degree. So clearly they were thinking hard about what it is they should do and how they should do it. But more importantly, we were thinking about the other 70% of people that didn't have college degrees, what they should do and how they should go about and do it. So as we look at where learners are today, we see there's a demand for future-proof programs. This is what they're signing up for: data science, computer science, sustainability, business and leadership courses. And I could tell you with, I think, some authority that we saw a great difference between what they enrolled in prior to COVID and what they enrolled in post-COVID. Health and safety became number one. Obviously, there were reasons around the world that people would want to take courses on how to use a ventilator. 250,000 people signed up in one day for a ventilator course that Harvard put on edX that they offered for free. So a little bit of an anomaly in terms of what people want to take. But interestingly, while the 7 years before had seen a focus on technical skills, all of a sudden, the leaders in the companies that were doing the hiring started talking about the fact that they would like to have people that also had leadership, social skills, soft skills, which is what they call them. We've called them human skills and power skills in the conversations that we've had. I love power skills as a term because it really is about how you can take the ideas that you've got and work to develop and move the company and the business forward. It's not just about what you know technically. So pre-2020, this was the world as we saw it. 100% on campus, 0% online. And then as you look at the new normal, this is what we're going to see now. We went to 100% online, 0% on campus. And so our prediction going forward is that the new normal will be 60% on campus, 40% online. That extends into the corporate training world as well. So in the corporate training world, while many trainings may have taken place in person, less and less will, and there's more and more outreach to be able to get the skills that you need by going to outside resources that match the learning pathways and the skills taxonomies that have been developed in the industry. LinkedIn has just done it. edX has adopted MZ and Burning Glass's 36,000 skills tagged to every single course in the platform. And there's a great new way to find out what it is you need to know and how you want to get there to go do it. So people generally are upskilling for career mobility. That's where the technical opportunity is. And when you do that, you have to see what's trending. And what we can do with 110 million courses being taken is tell you what's trending. It's critical thinking and problem solving. People are trying to cope with remote work. We shouldn't think about this as something that people naturally do. It takes a different skill set to be self-sustaining and persistent in taking and completing a course, even if there's a community around you, and they want in-demand skills that are going to be transportable as they move from place to place. So interestingly, what did those people do over the last year? 91% of them reported they took the courses and they had a positive career outcome. 79% of them complete courses. Why is that important? At a state university level, the completion rate runs between 61 and 63% on average. And if you were to look at a MOOC platform and see how many people were taking courses, they didn't take them necessarily in order to complete them, but business learners did. And 79% is a shockingly high number. And it really speaks to, I think, the motivation of the people that are involved there. So they're taking multiple courses, they're taking courses that will take them to where they want to go. And I think the fact that they've now seem to be taking about 2 1/3 courses over a year indicates that there's a pattern there. So what do we have to do in terms of innovation? The first one is education has to be modular. Think about a course as a number of modules that are stackable that get you to an end result that you want versus something that may have been prescribed previously if you sat in the classroom. It also needs to be omni-channel. So it's great that we have online, but hybrid is probably the best answer. And I'm speaking more to corporates than I am to schools, that there is some in-person learning and there is some online learning. And it's going to be lifelong. There's no reason that people are going to stop or need to stop or should stop, especially when we've got a pace of change that's so fast. When learners take and complete a course on edX, they get a certificate. And if it's a Harvard course, they get it from Harvard. It's built into the system. They're now using this as the coin of the realm. It's very important for people to understand that every learner that takes a course and gets a certificate is posting it to their profile. They're posting it to their social media site. They're sending it to their employer. And there's a new trend, which I think is critically important for us to also be aware of. It's something that I've noticed over the last few months. And this is where employers have started to call companies like edX at scale and say, I need to hire thousands of people. I would like to mine the learners that have certificates in certain areas. Maybe it's Java, maybe it's cloud, maybe it's something in business and finance. Data analytics is a popular one. Just imagine a world where all of a sudden employers are not running ads online looking for people that have 4-year degrees, but say, I would like to find people that have just this credential. It's fine. And one of the things that we're looking to do, I think, as we move to the future, is to think about how we can get employers to run the test that would say, I hired this person, it cost me far less, I had far more candidates, they carried less debt. When I compared their performance to those that we hired through more traditional means, which includes recruiters and paying commissions, et cetera, we found that these people performed equally well, if not better, than people that we traditionally brought in. And by the way, a lot of these people that are reorganizing their lives or their careers, or they're working moms, or they're returning to the workforce, they're willing to work generally for a lot less money than a smaller portfolio of candidates that may have 4-year degrees that show up, whose resumes end up in the stack for evaluation. So there's benefits on both sides. It's a huge uplift from a low-paying hourly job, great career, great future, build your community, provide economic security to your family, provide variance and diversity in the workforce. And I can't tell you a single company that isn't being held accountable by their shareholders for what they're doing in diversity, equity, and inclusion in these days going forward. And this is a way that companies can bring more people into the fold, which only betters the world situation. The other interesting thing about technology for global companies in this type of learning is that it doesn't matter if I don't know anything about the schools that you have available to you in Argentina or in India or in Canada or in the US. If you've all taken and passed the same rigorous courses from the same top 200 world-ranked universities, I know that you have a sense of the skills that we are probably going to need to have in our company that you've acquired on your own for a very low cost. And I think that that helps us think about people in a different way than we did before, depending on where they came from, what school they went to. This is the school for the future for all of us. And these skills pathways are ones that we see as the most popular. So some of you may be more interested in that. To Tomorrow's workforce, they're looking for these courses. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that now because I'm running a little short, but I wanted you to be aware that these exist. And this is the future of work and learning. We think this is here to stay. It's blended. There will be continuous upskilling and alternative pathways. I think the new normal is a good thing. I hope that you think it's a good thing. Technology and the open source code that we've put out, as well as what others will be doing, will greatly enhance the future. And I thank you so much for letting me have some time with you. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Lee. First, I just want to recognize and what an honor we have today to have you. You're a true veteran of the MOOC, this business model, and for so many years that we are seeing it evolving until like today, like boom, with that pandemic, and this explosion. And so one of the question is that how do you see MOOC evolve? What's your take on it? What's your sentiments, or even your thinking, your own personal feeling? Like you see this, right, from in the beginning in Harvard and MIT. I can only imagine maybe you start with a small little room or lab to think about all this planning, and then now this is it, right? And there's a lot of skeptics and also a lot of people naysayer, right? And also caution from the education institution. But now today, how do you see this evolve during all these years? Lee, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, sorry. I think there was a lot of hesitation in the beginning about this in MOOC V1, where it was here to replace professors and they were going to lose their jobs. And then we got to V2, and now we're in, I'd say, V3 of this. Here's what's to come. First, all schools are going to adapt some type of online learning that is going to involve something similar to MOOCs, and it's going to start in grade school. There is no way that we can train enough teachers and educators on the most high demand emerging topics like coding that could even work at an elementary school level. So this is something students are going to start to experience now, and through life, they're going to continue to use that. And when they get to college, they will no longer be subsected into, this is your major. You cannot take courses in the School of Engineering if you're in the School of Business, if you're in the School of X. You will form your own curriculum. The second thing that I think is going to happen is we're tied up in this concept of courses right now today, but down the road, think about it as being very adaptive, where I go, this is what I need to learn. I need a module from this course and a module from that course and a module from this course. I'm creating my own pathway based on the skills tagging that I'm trying to get. And I don't have to sit through 10 hours of courseware if I have 10 hours of things I want from different courses to make the perfect opportunity for me to learn. I think you'll see a lot more in adaptive that way. And I think that you'll see the ability for people to create cohorts on the go. So right now, putting together a cohort in a course is possible. We do it all the time. There's an expense involved with that. But if I wanted to form a cohort as a company, I could do that. If I wanted to take 4 or 5 people and say, this is our particular area of interest, and we want to have a discussion forum that's all our own, because we're developing new transformational code and other products, I think that that's going to be something that's very realistic to expect and to see that over the next 5 years or so.
Another question from audience is how did you cope with this rapid growth during this pandemic? Like, was there any surprises, challenges that you can share?
Well, yeah, the cool thing about this platform is that it was built to scale. So it was only a matter of cost of adding more servers in order to go do that. We already had 40 million people using the platform at any given time. So I think that we did not suffer through a challenge like that. If anything, the challenge has been in trying to employ enough people to deal with the expansion. So we need to, I like to say, eat our own dog food. Other people find that repulsive. But we need to create our own curriculum of what it would take to be a great engineer in our business, make it available, and then hire the people with that certificate. I got to find the time to go do it.
You tie in this notion about the mindset of the employers in this whole equation, right? How do you see that? Was it a surprise to you, or that was part of the business plan that you have all along?
It was a shocking surprise. It was always part of the dream that employers would recognize that we were reinventing higher education as educators, and that the idea of a four-year degree was an outmoded concept. Maybe you should take 1 year on campus, then a year in internship, and then do some, whatever. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. The fact that they came to this realization so quickly as it became harder and harder to find people to employ was amazingly interesting. And now they were using it as a way to retain employees in jobs that the employees didn't want in the first place, this is the most interesting. There's two really interesting things. If I have a second, I'll tell you, if you allow me to tell you about them. The first one was, we know you don't want to be an Amazon truck driver, but we need truck drivers. And if you'll join us, we will subsidize the courses online that you need in order to get the job you want here or somewhere else. If we can get 2 years out of you instead of 1.25, that's a massive savings. And major retailers, whether it's Walmart or Starbucks or Amazon, have gone down this route and found it to be successful and that it really works. The other thing that's really interesting as part of the way to attract employees is that they say, if you're going to exit here, then we are going to provide you access to education that will allow you to get the job you really want somewhere else. And it's not because they're letting them go, though in some cases it has been related to that. We have many corporations that have bought millions of dollars worth of access for learners who are departing employees. And it, I think, builds goodwill. It provides them with an opportunity. Never thought I'd see that, not in a million years, but it's happening so quickly. It's really, I think, one of the major goals we've got, and that's to include people that don't have college degrees or couldn't afford to go get them, so that they can enter the workforce if they've got the grit, desire, time, and opportunity to take the courses and the topics that are interesting to them that employees want to hire from. Yeah. ZipRecruiters elsewhere in the world are also running programs to figure out what you need on your resume and refer them to online courses that would allow you to make $20,000 more if you had this certificate or credential based on what they're being asked by employers.
Thank you, Lee. This is really, I don't think we can get all these insights from anyone else, from you, right from, you have been there right from the beginning. So thank you so much. Can I now ask Lee to stay and for the panel discussion later? Paul, can you unmute yourself and share your camera? And thank you, Lee, for the presentation. And now I'm welcome Paul Belfanti from Macmillan Learning.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Paul Belfanti. I'm VP Products of Content Systems for Macmillan Learning, and I'm going to be talking about the future trends in EdTech from the perspective of an educational publisher. So a lot of these trends were already in motion before COVID, but obviously COVID really accelerated them. From a customer focus, I mean, of course, we're always looking to meet the customer where they are, but because of COVID, we really amped that up. There were a lot of instructors who may not have actually adopted our digital products. Maybe they were just using a print product. We offered our digital products to them, got with a significant human investment from our specialists and our customer service folks, got them help to set up their courses and do all that. And as a result, not only did we generate some goodwill, but coming out of the intensity of the first wave of the pandemic and that transition, there are a lot more instructors that are now comfortable with technology or see the value of where it can play in a blended course. So we are focusing on courseware, of course, and that means ease of use in a large degree. We want to be able to have an intuitive way of creating a course. Sometimes we'll provide a standard template with a pre-built course that then the instructor can modify, or they can start from scratch. But in order to do that, we got to make sure that all the resources and content that we provide are easy to find, organize in an intuitive way, and that, you know, creating activities, assigning them, creating your calendar, syncing to gradebook, all that stuff is as straightforward and as user-friendly as possible. And of course, we got to enable customization. We feel very strongly about the quality of the content and the resources that we provide in our courses. But of course, instructors have their own good content that they're going to want to incorporate. And there's third-party content that they may want to integrate as well. And so to make that very possible, very easy to do is key to making the whole system work. And of course, we want to prioritize student engagement as well. We're having more contact. You know, traditionally publishers went through the gatekeeper of the instructor or the department to adopt products, and the student was just, you know, kind of a pass-through on the other side. But we're engaging with students directly more and more, and we want to make sure that we're creating an immersive experience that's really engaging for them on a number of ways. And we've got data that shows that when we do reach the right level of engagement, when students are completing assignments and doing, you know, the kind of activities that we've designed to optimize their learning experience, their grades improve. And it also can be a real leveler of, you know, for students that are coming into the education system, the higher education system for the first time, as opposed to, you know, traditional students that have a history in their families and are well prepared for college. The resources in these courses can level that up. It can close those gaps in a meaningful way. And because of the data that we're able to collect from these platforms, we can create reports and insights. We can show the effectiveness of using the courses and the materials. We can show performance data to instructors, both on an individual student level and on a more macro level, and not just on the basis of how students are doing around a particular assignment or group of assignments, but even in a more macro level to around, let's say, all assignments that are associated with a particular learning objective. And by doing so, we can also create recommendations. When we see certain trends coming back from that data, we can point instructors to resources within the course that can help them close the gaps that are being exposed by some of the data that we're seeing. And another, you know, key part is that commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't mean in a gratuitous way, I mean in a meaningful way. There's a real commitment that has to be made to make sure that the content that students are engaging with are reflective of the kind of diversity that exists in the student population. And that includes accessibility. It's an important aspect of it. It makes actually the performance of online courses better for everyone. And of course, you want to make sure that everyone who wants to learn has the ability to learn. From a more internal facing focus, it means that we need to go about creating and delivering our content and our products and our services in a different way, in a more holistic way. You know, the tradition in higher ed publishing has been a pretty linear one. You think in terms of ink on paper, you make a book, you might digitize that book into an ebook and then enhance it and distribute it within the courseware, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the way to really go about creating a holistic experience. So you want to create a collaborative environment where the different people, contributors, authors who are creating instructional material, assessment, interactives, rich media, all the different components can work together, can see what each other is doing, can communicate with each other so that it's being built up as a whole strategy, not in this kind of sequential handoff and I'll do my part, you'll do your part, and we'll stitch it together down the line. We want to be more agile and innovative in our product development, take on a test and learn culture, which means we want to be able to put together a new idea, package it within our courseware environment and present it to our customers, get their feedback, rinse and repeat until we feel like we've got something that's going to be meaningful and have traction in the market, as opposed to saying, mocking something up in a PowerPoint or a Word document and say, this is what it's going to look like when we get to the courseware. That's not a meaningful way to get feedback. All this means digital first approach, right? You want to center around an online structured authoring environment where there's that immediacy of content creation where people can review, comment, make corrections directly. You can take a single source multi-output approach, meaning you have one source of truth that can carry information for multiple outputs, whether it's print, whether it's digital, ebook, etc. Profile different things, have a static image that's going to go into a print product, but maybe substitute that for a video if it's going into digital, and then you can filter those things out to say, if it's going to this target, I want this stuff and I don't want that stuff. But that common information that exists across all the different permutations is in one place. So if you need to make a correction, if you want to update, make a change, you do it in one place and you push it out to all the different permutations. Continuous improvement is a key way to think of the future, where we might change our approach to, let's say, the instructional content. So we make it so that it has a longer shelf life, so to speak, where the information is less likely to change over a period of time, but then other information that is more variable, that will be wanting to refresh, is on the online component. So you can update it, you can refresh it. Economic data, for example, or health data. COVID is a great example, right? If you had a print book that was published right before COVID and you couldn't revise it for another 2 or 3 years, that wasn't going to be a very relevant product pretty quickly. And we want to have that data-driven approach both internally as well as providing those capabilities to our customers. So as we're thinking about how we want to improve our products over time, we want to know, of the stuff that we've delivered, how has it been received? What's been assigned by professors? Have students completed the assignments? How did they perform on those assignments? What do we need to look at? Was it at the right level that we tagged it for? If people are interested in something, let's make more of that. Let's improve that. If nobody is paying any attention to something, we have to understand why and maybe do less of that. Content management strategies and knowledge management strategies, I'll talk about a little bit more later, but again, a different approach from some of the traditions of the print legacy, where things were organized in files, structures based on individual titles or product families. You need to take a more generic approach so that things can be discovered and related to each other, so that you can pull together new configurations of things in new structures, and leveraging new technologies like artificial intelligence and natural language processing to automate some content classification, crawl your content so you can map it to learning objectives or subject taxonomy terms and so forth, again, to make it more powerful to connect things and find and use them. So from a technology perspective, we're talking about digital transformation, obviously, and this is in an industry that has been has a long legacy of not being that digitally oriented, even though we've been working in a digital format for years. But you need to think about much more of an ecosystem approach, systems as opposed to tools. There's a lot of components that go into what makes up the content creation systems that were individual built for purpose tools that had to operate on their own, but then they were part of something that you would then hand off to somebody else to do their thing, et cetera, et cetera. Now these things need to be much more connected. If you want to have that holistic collaborative experience that I was talking about, these things need to be integrated. And as a result, you can find yourself with Franken systems where you have all these individual components, some built in-house, some acquired, some partnered, that are kind of bolted together now, but because of the different architectures and structures and so forth, and the different ages of the software, there can be friction as content passes from one part to another that can introduce errors or delays and so forth. So you need to take a real look at what you've got and say, can we remediate some of these things? Do we have to replace some of these things? How close can we get to, kind of a common architecture and code base where things can flow as fluidly as possible? And you really need to rethink your workflows. Everything I've talked about so far, right? You can't say that we're going to produce new products and deliver them to our customers and test and learn and be agile by using the same workflows that we've had traditionally. So, and if you do introduce new technology without redesigning those workflows, you're going to spend a lot of money on that technology and you're not going to get anything from it. And you're going to wonder why, you're just not as productive or you're not as agile or innovative as you intended to be. Well, it's because you didn't redesign the workflow to take advantage of that technology. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in terms of how that workflow design actually should drive a lot of the decisions on how that technology is brought online. And recognize that as publishers, you're in the software business now. Ink on paper is not the mindset that you should go in on. It can still be the output. Print is not going away anytime soon, but it's one component of that larger ecosystem and experience, and it's becoming increasingly more of a secondary or complementary component to a more holistic, a more rich experience that can be delivered in an online course. And you want to be able to have that continuous improvement that I talked about before. You want to be able to be more efficient and faster to market, and just realize that the same kind of practices in terms of standards, in terms of the ability to make changes so you don't have to review everything a million times, can allow you to do things that we didn't do before. The standards and best practices this is all built on starts with, I think, the semantic structures, whether it's an XML or an XHTML structure. You want to define your content in terms of what are its key elements, how do they fit together, what are the reading orders, the sequences, and do all that independent of presentation, right? There are style sheets, there are cascading style sheets for digital, there's style sheets in InDesign or whatever for print that will take care of that presentation layer, but you want to have a detailed breakdown and knowledge of how your content is put together so that you can manipulate it. You can grab certain things, you can transform it in innovative ways without doing a lot of manual intervention. I talked about the holistic approach. I won't cover that ground again. But the metadata factor is, I think, a really key thing. You need a knowledge management strategy and you need a governance structure around that. And what I mean by that is you really need to take the time to understand what is it that you want to do with your content? What does your customers want to do with your content? How do they want to acquire it? How do they want to search for it? How do they want to organize it? And therefore, how do you want to organize it? How do you want to be able to find it and connect it to other content that you've got as you're planning and building and developing new products? And as a result of that, you define content models that basically identify what are the key essential elements of metadata that you need to add to all your content and your assets that help to discover it, to help to connect it to something else. A lot of the systems that exist now in the publishing world is for people to more easily find something that they already know is there. And what we need is to be able to find things that we don't know are there, and then finding that one connect to something else that's like it, and the other thing that's like that, or a little bit different. But hey, I didn't even know that existed. I could be really interested in that. I could really use that for something, and I didn't even know it existed before. Tying things to learning objectives, to topic terms, etc., enhances all that ability to expand the view and make connections between things that create much richer relationships and experiences, and using those analytics as a result, that you can pull that data together. You can parse it in ways that give you much more power and the ability to make decisions based on empirical data, not just anecdote. And again, accessibility is a key component. You want to build in that alt text, do it as part of your front end workflow, not as a post process. Define that reading order through your semantic markup, have MathML embedded. Sometimes with complicated equations, you have to present it more as a graphic, but you want that MathML in the background so that the screen readers can still describe it to somebody with a vision impairment, etc. And a lot of it really, of course, comes down to people. The technology challenges are there, but usually digital transformation lives and dies on the basis of the people and the ability to execute a change management strategy. So starting with leadership, you need to really present that vision for the future and make it a compelling vision, one that's inspiring. You lay out a strategy for how you're going to get there, communicate that strategy early and repeat it often, and make it a shared journey. Don't make it feel like there's a top-down, this is leadership telling everybody what they're going to do. Bring them into it, make them part of the decision-making. How are we going to go on that journey? Create that resilience within your company because parts of that journey are going to be difficult. And setting the context is really important, right? It's been a very disruptive time in the educational publishing markets over the last couple of years, several years. We need to be able to adapt and produce new ways of delivering our content and deliver new content and services. And if people don't realize that, they need to really understand that it's a matter of survival, and that the ability to be much more agile and do that continuous improvement is key to that. You want to be able to respond quickly to your customer needs. And it's not all just, if we don't do this, we will die. There's opportunities for growth. If you can execute this kind of a strategy, you can reach markets that you didn't reach before. There are customers that you may be able to tap into that just weren't there before. So it's a way of increasing your revenue, not just being able to sustain your business that exists today. And the way to, I think, go about that most effectively internally, you can't bring everybody along. There's going to be skeptics, there's going to be doubters, people with anxiety. They're not all going to get on board at the same time. And spending time trying to get everybody going in the right direction at the same time is not very efficient. So find your thought leaders, find those early adopter types. When you deliver that vision, find the people who said, great, why didn't we do this 5 years ago? And put them front and center, put them in charge of initiatives or pilots or whatever, give them a high profile, and then put the resources behind them to make sure that they're successful. The skeptics will fall in line afterwards. Nothing succeeds like success. And lay the groundwork with the standards that I talked about before. Model those workflows, walk the walk before the technology is in place. How are we going to work differently when that new technology comes on board? And that accomplishes two things. It gets you prepared, so when that technology is there, people can step into it more elegantly. But at the same time, going through that process, you develop the requirements that technology needs to meet. And in the process of that, you're involving the staff in the solution. You're getting them invested so that the success of that implementation is increased. There are risks. From a change management perspective, if you don't have that clear vision, you're going to have a really hard time succeeding. If there's a lack of urgency, if you're not telling people, look, we're going to do this and we've got to do it quickly. This is not nibbling around the edges, incremental improvement. We've got to move fast to get where we need to go. If the commitment from leadership, if there's like a big announcement and then you don't hear from leadership again for a while, people will lose interest. They'll say they're not really into this, so I'm not going to get myself invested. And the next layer below leadership, the senior leadership, is actually really important to make sure that they're bought into that vision, they understand the strategy, and how they interpret how they're going to implement that strategy within their functional area is consistent. Because otherwise, if there's different ways that people have interpreted how to implement that strategy, you could have a lot of people going about solving those problems in good faith, but actually going in different directions that are going to cause real problems in terms of how you bring it all together. And from an HR perspective, you need to make sure you don't allow the FUD factor to fester. FUD stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And you need to be able to monitor the zeitgeist of the organization and make sure that there's positive reinforcement. There are tangible examples of the progress that you're making, so that people's anxieties and insecurities don't start taking over and you lose buy-in. And it's really important to take a look at your overall organizational structure. You can't do all these things that I've been talking about with people who are in the same roles within the same structure in the organization as exists today. You need new skills, obviously, and that could be uptraining existing staff to gain new skills or enhance their skills, and to hire skills that you don't have. And then think about cross-functional teams in terms of the traditional kind of silos of editorial, production, technology, etc., and think more in terms of cross-functional teams where you have those different skill sets and perspectives that are coming together on a regular basis from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, and working together to solve those problems and bring their different skills and experiences to bear throughout, and get rid of that old, I've done my part, I'm handing it off to you, my work here is done, let me know how it comes out. And I think that this quote that I came across a few years ago really just sums it all up perfectly. Successful digital transformation relies on more than the right technology. It requires the right culture, the right people, and the right processes to support them. It must be a company journey that involves upskilling and changing employee mindsets, adapting structures and ways of working, and creating teams that can take advantage of new technologies. And if we have time, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Very interesting presentation, Paul. I just want to share with the audience that Paul is truly a perfectionist. We practice the delivery of this presentation, and he give no chance to any failure in terms of the system approach of delivering it. The reason why I say it's a compliment to you, because I truly think that that is very important aspect to lead through all this digital transformation, right? To be really hand tight on all the different steps. So the first question to you is that during this digital transformation model that you outlined, which is terrific, it's a very strategic approach. What are your personal take on the barrier and challenges that you need to address, right, in your own organization and in your or in your customer organization?
I missed the word you used, though. What kind of challenges?
Like barriers or challenge you need to address, or any
barriers? Yeah. Well, there are many. I mean, I think, especially in the publishing industry, you've got people who tend to be to stay in that industry for a long time. You've got people who are there for 10, 15, 25 years, and who have built their reputations and their expertise around older ways of working and mindsets that think, ink on paper, 2-page spread. And it's very hard to change that into, the ways that we have to be thinking about that sort of thing today. So, like I said, breaking down those silos, thinking in terms of what the team is, in that more sort of cross-functional way. I think the ideal way to come up with a new product is, have an editorial person, a development person, a designer, a UX or an instructional designer involved, a coder, a developer, who's all working together from the beginning and throughout the project to say, what do we need? Because otherwise you come up with these ideas, and if you haven't had somebody from the technical side involved and contributing ideas, and then you present, here's what we want you to do, and they're like, well, that's going to be really difficult to do. Whereas if they were involved from the beginning, they're like, okay, I understand what you want to do here. There's a different way of going about it. I think they can achieve the same outcome, but is a lot more efficient and can get us there quicker, that sort of thing. I think being able to just get through the kind of foot dragging that is inevitable, and that's where the leadership aspect really comes in to break through that, because people who are resistant to change have played the game before, so to speak. They've heard about big initiatives and they've nodded their head and said, I'm on board, chief, and then done everything they can to either ignore or undermine it. And they've waited it out and they've seen these things come and go, and they'll say, I'll just do it again this time. So there really just has to be a firm commitment, that sense of urgency, And, if people aren't willing to come along, then you just have to be willing to make those changes too, because not everybody is going to make that transition.
I have a question about the system approach, and it's rather linked to this movement. Would you say that the movement of education publisher is moving into the education model itself? Like you are trying to create some part of the learning management system. You're trying to create some sort of the active learning model where the learner and the content interaction is kind of like produced by you, created by you, right? Would you say that there is a blur line between the education operation and the where the learning activities are and the publisher activities, the operation? Is there a beginning to see a blur line, or how do you see this morph into in the last 2 years? Is there any change in your opinion?
Well, I think that, again, with Macmillan, that our commitment to releasing recently a new courseware platform that takes a different approach, it very much reflects that. I think we feel like that's the richest learning experience that can produce the greatest outcomes. But at the same time, you're always partnering with your instructor, with your customer, and with the institutions. And in some cases, you're also having to think about a different, more modular approach to how you are delivering the content in the first place. Because a lot of our content and our courses get delivered into it's about half and half. People adopt our flagship proprietary LMS, and the other half are delivered into a university's already established LMS. So you've got to be able to work both sides of that. And in some cases, we're seeing signs where our customers may not even be interested in a prepackaged course. They've got their own LMS, they've designed their curriculums, and they have courses set up. What they may really want is just access to our content. On kind of a subscription model or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of investigation that still has to be done to see if that's a viable business model. But there are signs that those kind of trends are emerging as well, and to be able to adapt and take advantage of those kind of emerging opportunities. But at the same time, the activities that we provide in pre-class, in-class, post-class types of activities really tie in, and we want to be as close to how our customers want to create their learning experience, give them the flexibility to do so, but give them the platform that enables them to realize their vision as they put their curriculum together.
Would you want to give some examples of some of the interactive learning experiences that you have seen that work successfully for your customer?
Sure. I mean, we have in kind of a pre-class, they're I won't call them really assessment items. They're kind of metacognitive exercises that help students understand where they are going into a course or going into a set of lessons in that course. So it orients them, gives them some information, gives them a way to sort of test themselves and say, what's my level of understanding as I go into this? Therefore, I know where I'm strong. I can take some questions and do some lessons, and based on what I'm showing competency in, I won't get those kind of questions and what further, and where I'm struggling, I'll get more of that sort of an adaptive kind of approach, and help the student themselves understand where they're strong, where they're weak. It'll help where they need to concentrate, or where they need to go to their instructor or an advisor for additional help is one example. And the other one is there are interactive experiences, whether it's something that's created in something like Articulate Storyline, for example, where you have the ability to have, animated or progressive, choose your own adventure kind of experiences that aren't, the straight instructional material, but they enhance that experience, right? They reinforce, and they're not giving you a formal assessment, but they're giving you tests to say, for your own benefit, essentially, how well you understanding this, and giving that kind of information in various ways, so that different types of learners who respond to different kinds of experiences have that variety, so that the thing that they can make the most progress in is available to them.
Thank you, Paul. Please stay back for the panel discussion where we talk about the innovation keys to the future. Thank you, Paul. And I'm now going to invite George Kirscher to join us. George, can you unmute and also show your camera? Thank you.
You can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you yet. Yeah.
There we
Good.
go.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is George Kirscher. I'm Chief Innovations Officer with the DAISY Consortium, and also Senior Officer of Global Literacy with Benetech. So I've got a few slides to share. So there we go. You can see it now, right?
Yes, I can see your screen, but it's not your PowerPoint. Yeah. There you go. You can see your PowerPoint. And you can make it
Okay.
if you want. Perfect.
So in ways of introducing myself, I've been in the digital publishing arena for over 30 years. I am blind. I use a screen reader, and that provides a very interesting perspective on all these new digital opportunities. And Lee's presentation and Paul's presentation reinforce I think it's a fact that people with disabilities have more opportunities in the digital age than in the old print era. We coined a term called print disabilities, people who are blind, low vision, and people with dyslexia who cannot read standard print. And the size of that population, I'm always asked the question, how big is this group of people? Well, people who are totally blind is a really small portion of the population. People with low vision is larger, but people with dyslexia is huge. And very interesting people like Charles Schwab, Joe Montana, Muhammad Ali are all dyslexic and are hugely talented. So it's a diverse population that approaches nearly 20% of the population. And when we think about DEI, I just want you to think about people with disabilities being included in that group. And when you're talking about employment and bringing people on your team, I highly recommend looking at actively trying to hire people with disabilities, because they do bring different perspectives to your team, and you begin to understand how people with disabilities have to use content in different ways. So the DAISY consortium that I work for is a consortium of libraries from around the world who have traditionally provided services to people who are blind. So alternative books and things like this, audio recordings for decades and centuries providing Braille. But we're moving into a modern era where digital products can be accessible right out of the box. So we believe that people need to have equal access to information, and this is reinforced by the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. And in most nations, there's laws that govern access to information. So what we do is we develop the solutions that complement the areas. So we work in the W3C on the publishing standards and HTML. We've only got 15 employees, $1 million budget, so we're teeny. So we have to position our people strategically in the best location to have the most impact. Avnish Singh is on the advisory board of the W3C. He's also blind. I chair the Y Steering Council, and of course, the web accessibility guidelines, WCAG, are absolutely critical in this getting access to information. We've put Matt Garish in as editor of the Epub 3.3 spec, and he watches everything that he puts into that specification for accessibility. And Avnish also chairs the accessibility task forces of the community groups and the working groups in publishing. Total, we've got 6 employees from the working on W3C specifications. So that's, a third of the company working in W3C space. So we think that, and I hope many people agree with us, that the DAISY Consortium is fundamental to accessibility in digital publishing. We've worked with the Epub 3 specification from day one. We do see HTML as a base for publishing that has a strong, strong future. Epub 3 is great today. HTML in the future has huge potential to be fully accessible. We've created the accessibility checker for Epub, which has integrated into many publishers' workflows, and it provides an automatic checking of the Epub document and provides a report that the publisher can use. We are encouraging everybody to use the modern digital publishing format. If you Google modern digital publishing and DAISY, you'd get to a white paper we created about all the benefits of publishing using Epub that might sit beside more of the older traditional ink on paper approaches using something like PDF. So we've got a number of inclusive publishing partners that we engage with. And if you follow some of these links, you can read about who they are, what they're doing. Inclusivepublishing.org is a great website where we're trying to gather all of this information. And we love to have people engage with our community. A couple of things that Paul said are absolutely spot on. And Macmillan is a great leader in publishing accessibility. They're receiving Global Certified Accessible certification from Benetech. They were the first one to go through this route. And what happens there is the publisher provides to Benetech examples of their EPUB documents, and they're reviewed for accessibility. And once Benetech is convinced that their workflow always produces accessible content, then they're given the certification and they can use that stamp on all their publications. Last week, the community group published the user experience guide for displaying accessibility metadata. So inside the EPUB, there's schema.org accessibility metadata that is required to be present in a Born Accessible publication. That can also be produced in Onyx, and we created a crosswalk between schema.org and Onyx showing how to correctly present that accessibility metadata. So if you go to VitalSource or to RedShelf, they're now exposing that accessibility metadata to professors and end users. And I would encourage educators to make sure that they're selecting content that is born accessible, that has proven accessibility features. And if it's not accessible, don't use that content. Looking at the future and how the different, I see huge potential in how educational materials can change over time, taking advantage of data visualizations, of augmented reality and virtual reality and learning. And it's a little scary because I do think that people with disabilities, if we don't design properly from the ground up, taking into account people with all kinds of disabilities, especially the sensory disabilities, that there's a potential for these people to be left out. So here again is where I encourage people to bring people onto your teams that have disabilities, that can work with you, that'll bring a perspective that's sorely needed and that's missed most of the time. So Rachel, I told you I'd make it quick. Hopefully we can get into that panel discussion at this point.
Yeah, and George, I intend to invite you again to talk deeper into all the resources, which is overwhelmingly rich, very informative, and also, so the first question I think is more on how would you advise someone to create innovation, innovative model, or whatever how you say it, using the resources that you talk about? What do you think are the innovation that with the resources that Daisy has produced, you yourself has seen over the years, that the community has produced?
Well, the first innovation I would build on is our standards. So the W3C has a great track record for vetting the specifications that come from them. HTML, EPUB, CSS are all, excellent resources. You want to build on those standards. If you create your own specifications, your own internal design, that's fine. But right now I see a lot of innovation being built on the fundamental standards that we already have. They can be incubated, they can be developed. I think developing it in W3C space is a really, really good idea rather than just having a closed shop and trying to build something on your own. So that would be my fundamental suggestion, is base it on standards and build it within the standards arena. And again, hire people with disabilities to be part of your team.
I got one more question to you. Is that while going through this whole exercise of presenting, I realized that both of us are at times blind or can't hear because I can't hear what you're hearing from the screen readers, right?
Right.
And you can't see some of the things I'm seeing you, how you're presenting, right? You know, like for example, the lights, and this morning we were playing with the lights and how, you know, you can look you know, in a light, in a brighter setting.
Right.
And all this, how do you see in presentations like this and in publishing per se, how can you bridge that gap of understanding between the different groups of people coming together to produce the final product?
So the people who are blind are not going to be able to see information, but it can be communicated in many different ways. So Paul mentioned alt text as a fundamental, and it's required to be on any web page or Epub document where there's an image that conveys information. You need to have alt text that is a short description of that. If that image conveys more information, it's a flow chart, pie chart, something where there's detailed information, include extended descriptions. So that, and that's a requirement now yeah, for the Epub accessibility specification 1.1. That's the current draft in the working group. Macmillan has been doing this for years. Other publishers that I see are doing it in higher ed, and the books that are coming through are just gorgeous EPUBs. They're so well designed, easy to use with a table of contents. You've got go to page function, so if the print book is being used, everybody can be on the same page. It's amazing to be involved with education where the educational materials are born accessible and you can read it just like everybody else. Data visualizations are tough. We are working on methods to make this these data visualizations able to be explored with SVG. There's a lot of work on how to explore these kinds of things, and that's evolving. But boy, your basic college textbook today can be very, very accessible. And a shout out again, referencing MathML, just a terrific specification. My screen reader can read the MathML and present each little piece of the expression to me, one piece at a time. We can dive down into the subparts of the expression, and it's possible for me to use my screen reader to read that kind of content.
Amazing, George. I think it's just simply amazing. You know, all the things, all these technologies, all these assistive technologies. Yeah. With that said, I would like to invite Lee and Paul to come back to the screen, not to the podium, to the virtual podium. Paul, can you show your camera and unmute yourself? So I just want to start the panel session and just say how amazing your presentations are, just your experience that you bring to this discussion. And it just shows how technology play a central role in, like, now I'm communicating with you through technologies, through a virtual platform. And how, so the first questions to the panel, and everybody can just chime in on this, is what is innovation means to you in your business? All right. Anyone who wants to start?
Well, I'll jump in.
Thank you.
So we don't have dead air. Innovation, from my perspective, really means wider acceptance and I think wider awareness that these new threads are developing and they're going to work and change our lives. I'm super proud of the fact that we have 40 million people. There's 7 billion people on this planet, and the majority of them have never heard of edX or what we're doing, or what people are doing in online learning, et cetera. So I think from my perspective, that's the number one thing we have to continue to strive for. And then from that come other adaptations that we can use that are technically feasible and then accessible to the great majority of people that would be using them. Certain things get suggested as this is the newest and greatest and hottest technological innovation. I get these conversations all the time. I've been doing this forever. And it's completely impossible that the normal person is going to be able to afford it, would adapt it, or it would fit into their world order. And just think about 3D televisions in your living room for one example. It doesn't mean that they're not coming, but trying to serve the widest audience that we can. And I'll throw that over to my esteemed colleagues and panelists here, both who I found fascinating today.
15 years ago, when a new technology came out, it would not be accessible to people with disabilities. Screen readers wouldn't work with it, and we'd have to wait a couple, 3 years before it was born accessible. The National Federation of the Blind was pretty upset when Apple came out with iTunes U, and sent a letter to all of the universities that said, if you use this technology, the NFB will sue you. And Apple, Steve Jobs, did something unique. He didn't fight it. He totally embraced it, took the challenge up, and in 6 months had VoiceOver running on those old Apple devices. And ever since then, VoiceOver has been a part of the operating system, and it's I think that was a sea change for accessibility. So when innovation happens, when a new product comes out, from my perspective, it must be accessible out of the box. It needs to be born accessible, whether it's a publication, a piece of software, or hardware. I don't want to see a glucose monitor come out on the market again unless it can talk, because diabetic retinopathy is the leading cause of blindness. And for God's sake, let's make sure that this technology is accessible right out of the box.
By the way, there's a great course on the W3C made on edX, Introduction to Web Accessibility, so that anybody that's listening today that wants to know, needs the foundation on how to make their apps and websites work well for people with disabilities and meet international standards. You all have invested in it, so I'm giving you a plug because it's out there and available. Everyone should take advantage of that if they need an intro lesson on this.
And publishers have a good channel with the DAISY webinar series. So go to daisy.org/webinars, and we've got a whole flock on Epub and how to do it, and the tools that are there for you.
Yeah. I just want to add on to the plug that W3C X, hosted on edX, has reached more than 1 million learners. So something quite amazing, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's truly amazing. Paul, do you want to chime in? Like, what's your thoughts about innovation?
Yeah, it's from my perspective, as you might gather from some of the things that I emphasized, it's the innovation I think has to come from the people side first and foremost, changing the culture, adapting, looking at other industries, frankly, looking at some of the industries in the EdTech space like edX and others that are trying to eat our lunch as traditional publishers, or looking at startups and product management best practices, and looking at how those, that faster moving test and learn, build something, try it out, see how it works, improve it, etc., rather than, in publishing, it's been the tradition to take like 18 months to develop something and then put it out there and see if anybody really wants it. And we've got to be able to move and adapt in a much more nimble way. The other thing that comes to mind is the importance of data. Data scientists in our industry are becoming more and more important in terms of how we can understand our content better, how we can classify it better, how we can organize it and make better use of it, both for our internal purposes and externally. And to the point that George made before, around standards and the adoption of standards, I just want to emphasize what I think the role of those kind of standards are in being able to innovate. Lots of times when you talk about standards, people start to seize up and they're like, you're going to handcuff us, you're going to constrain our creativity. And it's just the opposite. And I say this as somebody who has a painting degree from the Rhode Island School of Design. I'm not a hardcore, you must do it this way kind of guy, but when you have those standards, it's a foundation that you can build on so that you can be creative, so that you can be innovative, and you build it on a platform that's solid so that when it has to go out there into the world and perform to a high level on all these different browsers, platforms, learning systems, etc., you have confidence that it's going to perform the way you want to. So it gives you that security to do innovative things. Whereas if you're just starting from scratch and doing everything, you might have something great and put it out there and it's going to crash and burn.
May I say something? I don't know whether Lee wants to respond to Paul's comment, but may I say, when I listen to all your presentation, how ready each one of you are, the readiness to innovate, that you're ready to go, like whatever the change in the market, whatever the change in your customer requirements, whatever it is, you're ready to go to innovate. So I just want to acknowledge that it comes through your presentations, which actually I lead to the second question, and I know that we're running a bit of time here. What to you are keys to the future? And to everybody, there are many people who are going to watch this video. What to you are the keys to the future to education technologies?
When I see how the publishing industry, especially in higher ed, has embraced accessibility, they believe in it, they're leading it, and they're driving it. It's just a great thing to see. And I think that we need to get everybody into that mindset where they embrace accessibility as part of the culture, part of society, and learn how to integrate people with disabilities into the fabric of everything that goes on in society and in technological developments.
Any other comments from panel?
Well, again, to slightly reiterate what I was saying before, I think the key from a publisher's perspective, providing content and services, is to take advantage of the new technologies to create richer and richer experiences and more diverse experiences so that different learning types can have access to the type of things that will advance them and create that level of proficiency. But then tying that in to a really rich data loop where you're getting insights, you're getting results, you can report them out, you can give it both to the individual student, to the instructor, back to yourself as the publisher, so that you're constantly being able to assess, prove out efficacy, and understand where you need to improve the product. And not just doing it through a couple of conversations with customers and focus groups, but really have some hard data that shows what's working and what's not, and where you have the opportunities to do something different in the future.
Yeah, I'd like to jump on and say that from my perspective, education is a right, it's not a privilege. And we have to continue to do what we can to drive the cost down. The models that have kind of come to be in the current world we live in were not acceptable. It's why MOOCs got started and have taken off and done what they've done. But the money that we make in business, which we need to do, needs to be based on volume at lower costs. More people drive the cost down, make it available to everyone.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally I think that this is where we should really drive this and drive everybody who wants to learn to be able to access to that knowledge and to be able to make good of their talents, their innate talents and whatever they have, right? To create a career, to create a good life, create for the community.
Yeah, he is exactly right. And I think that as higher ed publishers, we need to take the quality content that we're developing and understand how to break it out of the format of a 4-year college framework, right? Because that's just not a sustainable way forward. And there's too many people that want access and deserve access to that content that just don't fit into that framework.
So with that said, I know that we're running out of time, but I want to ask a question. Do you have a good time with us? And why do you want to join this thought leadership presentation and spending an hour and a half, more than an hour and a half with each other? Would you want to share that? Whoever wants to share. Sorry, I put you on the spot because I really enjoy time with you guys. So let anyone wants to share before we end this session? Why do you want to present your thought leadership?
I think the time flew by, Rachel. You and the organization did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
These are A+ colleagues on this panel today. Super enjoyable to listen and experience what they've been thinking about and what they're going to do. I give you a lot of credit for doing it. You should do more of it, and happy to participate anytime. Love the W3C.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that and just say, there's nothing more enjoyable than sharing ideas with intelligent people who also share the passion you have for this space and its mission. It's always a pleasure to talk to smart people about things you care about.
So I just want to chime in that it's great to hear my colleagues talk and not detect any mistakes. I mean, sometimes I'm presenting with people and they're just got it wrong. And these two guys got it right. So very, very happy to present alongside people who know their stuff.
I love that. I love that. So with that said, it's truly an honor for me to have you present in this session. I'm going to stop the streaming in a second. I want to wish a great day for the audience. The panelists, can you stay back, right, as I stop the streaming? Thank you for your time. And